It is Illinois week, Penn State football fans. It's the Blue White Breakdown podcast. I'm Bob Flounders, one of the top fans of the Dallas Cowboys who had a nice little week, no big deal, humble brag. Joined by Philadelphia Eagles fan Johnny McGonigal. Johnny, you look fabulous. We're going to go on the road this week to face an Illinois team. We're not facing them. Penn State's facing them. And they don't really have their act together yet, Johnny, but Penn State fans know it, right? You don't have to go back very far to fear Illinois. 2 years ago, I would say maybe the worst loss of the James Franklin era occurred at Beaver Stadium. Illinois was like 25-point underdogs, and they beat them in 9 overtimes. So there's a lot of different ways to look, Johnny, at this game Saturday. 11 a.m. kick for the Penn State Nittany Lions. It'll be a noon kick on the East Coast, but we're going to be in the middle of, or close to the middle of the country. But Johnny, what did you take away maybe from what James Franklin had to say, not just about Illinois, but his football team?
Yeah, Bob, you mentioned that 2021 game. I mean, that was historic for all the wrong reasons. If you're a Penn State fan, this weekend it's not going to go down the NCAA record books, but it is noteworthy and historic in a sense from a program perspective that it's Drew Allar's first road start as Penn State's starting quarterback. We were able to talk to Drew Allar earlier this morning. We're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, just before James took the podium for his Tuesday press conference. And I just think it's worth discussing. Drew, 2 games in as a starter, obviously looked very good against West Virginia in the season opener, throwing for 325 yards, 3 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. Looked efficient, poised, calm, what you wanted to see against Delaware. Didn't really have to do too much, really, with Singleton and Catron combining for 4 rushing touchdowns on the opening 4 drives. But I just think he's shown a lot of poise and he's playing just calm football right now and composed football. And that's what you're going to need to see out of him when he goes on the road for the first time and plays Illinois this weekend. 11 a.m. local kick. There's some different factors that go into that. Now, Illinois is also a defense that got torn apart by Kansas last week. So, from a talent perspective, from a game perspective, he might not have too many issues, but just something to keep an eye on and something that I'm sure we'll discuss.
Yeah, I think the line's about 14 points. It opened at 13.5. Illinois, and it's not to get all matchup-y, but Brett Bielema knows how to win in the Big Ten. His team lost a lot of talent off the 2022 team, and I think that there were a couple of those guys I think that were loomed large in that 2021 upset. Chase Brown has the at Beaver Stadium has the most rushing yards in a game by an opponent all time from that game, and it was just from a style standpoint, Johnny. Brett knows his team needs to play better. The defense hasn't been good, but they still have 2 really good defensive linemen on their team. One of them might be a first-round pick. I think he will be. And, it's one of those things that I think they're going to be a little bit more focused. I remember out of Big Ten Media Days, there were some prominent people that thought maybe they could actually win the Big Ten West. I don't know what it says about the Big Ten West, but a lot of people like their chances, and they do if they want to. I think they could play a specific style that could maybe slow the game down. I don't think Penn State and James Franklin are really concerned about it, and I think you mentioned the guy why they're not so concerned about it. I think with a healthy Drew Allar and an improved offensive line and 2 really good running backs, Penn State can play you any way you want to play them. If you want to try and minimize their possessions, you can do that, but you better get ahead early. This is a team I think that is really built to convert on 3rd down if it's short yardage. They have a lot of weapons in the passing game. For me, Johnny, I'm fascinated to see. I think there's a good chance on Saturday we're going to see some good-on-good action with our guy Olu Fashanu. I think he's going to knock heads with 2 of the better, at least one of the better, 2 of the best interior linemen in the Big Ten. The Newton kid is a guy that can play inside or outside, and they really like him. Keith Randolph's another player. And I think there's going to be some situations where Olu is going to find himself going against a guy where the other guy's good too. Not taking nothing away from Olu, he's just that good. But he's finally gonna, maybe since I don't know, the Michigan game last year, or maybe the Ohio State game before he got hurt, he just hasn't really had to deal with some guys that are really on his level.
Yeah, on the topic of Olu, and you mentioned Newton, Zan Newton. And he goes by Johnny Newton. Great name, great choice there from Newton. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the country, and he might get some snaps on Olu if he's twisting out or looping to the outside, little twists on the inside. If I'm Illinois, I'm taking my chances with him against anyone else other than Olu Fashanu, who is considered by many as the best tackle, the best offensive line in the 2024 NFL draft class. So this could be a big challenge for JB Nelson at left guard. At center, Hunter Norzad, who's been dealing with some bumps and bruises, and we saw Nick Dawkins get in there against Delaware. At right guard, Sal Wormley, the veteran. We've also seen Venga Ione to get in at guard as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if they rotate those guys, and especially if they're able to get a lead, get Venga reps against a player like Newton, in Big Ten play on the road. And so I think this is going to be a good test for Penn State's offensive line after, West Virginia didn't really have much other than just the cover zero, the blitzes. Delaware, talent-wise, just didn't have anything that really challenged them all too much. They were able to run the ball methodically the way they wanted to do it. And look, if Drew comes under pressure, like he did at some points in the West Virginia game, and we commented at the time about how well he looked throwing on the run and how comfortable he was, that could be the case again at Illinois. And so, when we were talking to him today, he said that after 2 starts, he just feels more comfortable in the offense, more comfortable in the scheme. The more reps, the better you feel, which makes sense. And he really emphasized that back in May, he and the wide receivers, guys like Keandre Lambert-Smith and Trey Wallace, they would get up at 8 in the morning, get out in the field at 8 in the morning before their classes, before workouts, and run routes and focus on 3 to 5 routes per day. And he said that that's really paying dividends right now already early in the season. It paid dividends in fall camp and paid dividends in their preparation coming into this year. And so it's not like Illinois is playing at Michigan or Ohio State, but it's still a road game. It's still a test for this team, for this young quarterback, for this offensive line. And then for a defense too, that they're going up against a dual threat quarterback in Luke Altmaier, who threw a couple of picks against Kansas, neither of which were really his fault. I mean, one was a desperation heave on 4th down, the other was a tip pass. But he's a guy who just ran for a 72-yard touchdown last week. And so I'm interested to see defensively as well how those DNs get upfield and pressure him, and also keep contained, keep their lanes, and stay disciplined as well.
Sure thing. Hey, our man our man Mel Kiper, just to follow up on Newton in his little insider evaluation grab bag, was talking about Newton, and he said he claims he's played a bunch of right end. Now I don't know. I don't see a lot of Illinois football. The guy's about 295 pounds. If he can play end though, and he does play end, you might be right, Johnny. But if he can play end, I wonder if they would put him against Caden Wallace, because that might be a matchup that might not be great for Penn State. But Penn State does have those 2 tight ends who could always help in a pinch. But I do think the Illinois defensive line is going to be a nice test, a very nice test for Penn State's offensive line. And Olu didn't play, as you said, did not play much against Delaware. It was wise maybe to keep him on a pitch count. I think they had Norzad out of there pretty quickly too. Makes a lot of sense. I think they probably had this game in mind specifically because even though Illinois might not be able to match Penn State player for player, they do have some players capable of wrecking a game if they get loose. And those 2 defensive linemen fit the bill. If they draw a bead on Drew Allar and get a shot on him. It can change as Jets fans learned last night, even though they won the game. The season can change on one play in an instant, and hopefully that will not be the case for Penn State in Champaign. Hey, Johnny, while we continue to talk about James Franklin's news conference, I just wanted to remind the listeners and the viewers that we really want you to become part of our PennLive Penn State Football Insider text group. It's a great group. We got a great initial response. There have been some stories on PennLive about joining it. You know, there's a lot of benefits to it. You'll get to hear daily from myself, Johnny, David Jones, especially over the weekend during the game. We build a lot of mailbags, I think, around our tech subscriber base, and you guys to get more information and to join if you want some more information. I highly recommend it. All you have to do is text Lions, Lions. That's pretty clever. See what we did there? You text Lions to the number 717-912-9969. 717-912-9969. I think it's worth the investment. Just wanted to pass that along. Johnny, I wanted to talk just a little bit. I know Penn State fans are always curious about the true freshmen, the greens and the yellows, the reds in the James Franklin traffic light system of whether they're going to play or not. Greens are the guys that are going to play more than the 4 games allotted to redshirt at the bowl game. Yellows, they don't really want to play, but if somebody gets hurt, they're not going to be afraid to play them. And reds, they're just probably not. Basically, they're going to redshirt. They're not really ready this year. We have seen some of the true freshmen that were designated as greens, King Mack and Tony Rojas being 2 of them. There's some other players. There's a couple other players that are greens. And James was also asked about a promising defensive end who really flashed against Delaware, who is a yellow right now. I think I want to make sure I have his name pronounced right. Jamil, is that right? It's Jamil Lyons.
It might be Jamil
Lyons. Yes,
Lyons.
He's from the Philadelphia area, I believe.
Yep.
Really nice looking prospect. It's just really hard to get a read on. It's one thing to do it at home against the Delaware offensive line. It's another to do it consistently and to do it. And Penn State does have a pretty promising defensive end room. We still haven't seen Amin Vanover, Johnny, and maybe that's another reason why they might want to take another look at a guy like Lyons. But he talked about those 2. He also talked about Javen Williams, the true freshman from Wyomissing, offensive lineman. Anthony Donko also played against Delaware. And he was actually asked about Nick Dawkins too. But there's a couple of freshmen, I think, that are getting closer and closer to hopefully challenging for maybe some second team reps on the defensive side. I thought there were a couple holes that emerged against Delaware, and I think Penn State, James Franklin and Manny Diaz are aware of those. So guys like Tony Rojas and even King Mack are guys that I think if they're ready, they're going to play.
Yeah, Bob, going into the season, James Franklin identified 4 true freshmen as Greenlight players. We talked about them before. King Mack, Elliott Washington, Zion Tracy, and Tony Rojas. Mm-hmm. And those 4 players have played in the first 2 games so far. They're on track to burn their red shirts and play more than 4 games this year on defense and special teams. You mentioned Lyons, Roman Catholic product, defensive end, who also has played in both games. And interestingly enough, in the West Virginia game, played 1 snap. So when that happened, I kind of saw that as like an early indicator. It's like, okay, you're not going to play a kid for 1 snap if you don't think he's going to play more than 4 games and burn his red shirt, which is why I thought it was interesting when James Franklin was asked about him today. That he said he's still in that yellow light category. He's played in 2 games. Maybe he will only play in 2 more regular season games and then play in the bowl game, be done. But I would kind of, if you were to pick outside of the 4 that he had already identified as a guy who's going to be greenlit, Lyons would be the pick at this point. I mean, he, like you mentioned, Delaware's offensive line is Delaware's offensive line, but anyone who saw Lyons' sack in the second half, where he just, came out of nowhere like a bullet train and just drove through that poor Delaware quarterback, There's something there, and especially if Amin Vanover continues to miss time. Zariah Fisher has been that fourth defensive end, but Lyons could even work his way in as maybe a fifth option as a guy who can be rotated in. And so those are the five that you're looking at as potential Greenlight, 4 definites, 1 possible there. And then, there was 14 or 15 total true freshmen that played in the Delaware game. A lot of them, not playing their first action for Penn State. Jackson Smollett got a few snaps. Andrew Rappel, who I've talked about before as a yellow light potential green light guy, got in and actually played more snaps than Jerry Cross, the redshirt freshman tight end. So I thought that was noteworthy. You mentioned Javen Williams, Anthony Donka, Chimdiona also got in. Dakari Nelson, Lamont Payne in the defensive backfield, Tavion Keys and Samir Robinson at linebacker as well. So, it was a good opportunity in the Delaware game for them to get in as many freshmen as they could, guys who they felt were ready to play and healthy and all that. I don't know how many. I don't know if Keys and Robinson, those guys they don't seem like players who are going to play 5, 6, 7 games for this team this year, but you never know. And so I'm going to be interested to see, first of all, which freshmen travel for the first road game, and then which guys ultimately get in the game at Illinois.
Yep, and it was Delaware, but I will say this about Rojas and Mack. You mentioned Lion Sack, and that was the look of a player who knows what he's doing out there, and when he gets an opening, he seizes it. Both Mack and Rojas are clearly athletes. They're clearly fast, and they did not hesitate against Delaware. King Mack really came up nicely, I think, for a tackle for loss, and Tony Rojas finds the ball in a hurry. I think that at some point, as Penn State continues to kind of settle on the 2 deep that they really want to roll with at some positions, I know they like their safeties. When I look at the linebacker group, and once you get past the starting 3, right, Kobe King, Abdul Carter, Curtis Jacobs, I think that you could make a case that if Manny feels like Tony Rojas can get lined up correctly and knows the defense, I think he can make a strong case for maybe he makes that the second team linebacker core better. There were just a couple of signs there against Delaware where there was a recognition problem on the touchdown, but when you just look at the athleticism there for maybe a couple of those players, I think Rojas would be an upgrade. I'm really going to be curious to see how quickly, or if at all, if Rojas can maybe make a move.
Yeah, and you mentioned King Mack. That's a guy that whenever he was on the field on Saturday, I was keeping an eye on, and you saw his speed. You saw the way he's able to lay the lumber and tackle. James Franklin described him on Tuesday as saying he's fast, he's aggressive, he's violent. The ball likes him. He made plays on the ball all during training camp, and you'll continue to see him gain confidence and have a really good year, and his role to continue to grow. And it was interesting, and something that we had noted previously, that he did get in as like a nickel, on defense, where Daquan Hardy has been out the last 2 games, and they've moved Johnny Dixon whenever they play nickel, which they haven't done a lot so far this season. But Johnny Dixon would be the guy in terms of starting players, would move inside, and Cam Miller would pop outside. But just something to keep an eye on as King Mack's development continues, and as he continues to grow as a player within this defense, and both personally and as a collective, right? Figuring out his fit. I think that's an area to watch. But just in the Delaware game, when it's like, okay, get these freshmen out there, let them play, let them run around and make some plays, he's one that definitely stood out, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's a freshman that continues to stand out this season.
Yeah. Hardy, I think that's been significant. They have the depth, I think, to cover for the loss of a veteran nickel corner like him against the likes of West Virginia and Delaware, who are not really going to make their living, at least against teams like Penn State, throwing the ball. So it's not that big of a deal. I liked Amin Vanover. I'm not sure what the deal is, but if he's healthy, he definitely helps the edge rushing group for sure. And another guy I think that can help, depending on just where he's at when he comes back, if he comes back, is Keziah Izzard. He's a guy that can push the pocket, can get penetration. The defensive tackle room, it's really, really hard to get a read for how good they were against Delaware. But in the West Virginia game, they were matched up against some really, really good players, not just in the Big 12 nationally. And I thought it was a long night for more than one or two of those guys. But I think the West Virginia interior offensive line is going to do that to some people all year. So I still don't know what to think, Johnny, about the defensive tackle group. I think this will be a good indicator for sure. Illinois pushed Penn State around 2 years ago. They did have P.J. Mustipher, and I think they have the running game and the running quarterback to cause problems. And I'm really curious to see. I obviously don't have a lot of worries about the defensive ends. I'm curious to see, number one, how Penn State handles Altmaier, and can they keep him in the pocket? I didn't think they did a great job with that with Garrett Green at West Virginia. James thought they played well against the quarterback at West Virginia. He just said that guy's a lot better than people realize, and that may be the case. But I just think when you look at maybe keys to the game, if it's going to be a game for Illinois, I think they're going to have their way inside against the middle of Penn State's defensive line. And, those defensive tackles at Penn State, as Manny said last year, we have the right to improve as a defense, and they did last year. And you can't forget about the fact that I think this Penn State defense will just keep getting better and better as they get more comfortable this year. But to me, that's a big matchup in the game, is how the defensive tackles are going to play.
Yeah, and within that matchup, one specific player that I'm going to be watching closely this weekend is Zan Durant.
Yeah,
the sophomore defensive tackle who he played 170 snaps for this defense last year, got some run, but was never like the featured guy at defensive tackle. And again, you have to take it with a grain of salt because it was Delaware. But I thought he looked really explosive and really good last weekend. And if he's able to do that again and create that interior pressure, especially if Penn State, not really if, but because that's just the kind of talent that they have on this defense, that Illinois is going to be in third and medium to third and long this game. And you like the Prowler package. You like what you're able to do there with your Manny Diaz and create some disruption and some chaos. But look for Zan Durant. And if he's able to get that interior pass rush, use that explosiveness that he has and get home. Because if you're Altmaier and you're looking at Chop Robinson, Adee Size, and Dennis Sutton on the outside at the end, and you're getting pressure from the outside, if he's able to step up and work the pocket through the middle and buy himself that extra second or two to keep his eyes downfield and make a play and extend drives, like that's what could make this a more interesting game. But if you got Zan Durant right in your face, if he's getting off his man and getting him applying pressure up the middle, then Altmaier might be running for his life all day. And so I really think that's a key to watch in this game. The defensive line as a whole, because they weren't happy with how they played against West Virginia. We talked to we talked to Denai Dennis Sutton after that game, a couple days after, and he called it sloppy. That there were a lot of missed opportunities.
Yes.
And so this is a Kansas defense that had 6 or 7 sacks against Illinois last week. And, Penn State has a hell of a lot more talent up front than Kansas does. And so it could be one of those performances for Penn State's defensive line. They just got to play smart and play how Manny Diaz and Deion Barnes is coaching them up.
Yeah. Johnny, let's get to one more point. I want to get your gauge on this here on the Blue White Breakdown. It's Tuesday, September 12th. We're recording this around 4 o'clock East Coast time. Penn State visits Illinois, 1-1 Illinois in Champaign. Wow, what a city, Champaign! I know, Johnny, you're pretty pumped to get there.
Chomping at the hip.
It's about 2 hours. What is it, southwest or south of Chicago? And
I don't even know.
I actually am kind of glad it's an 11 a.m. kick. If it was a night game, I think I'd be brooding. But I just wanted to get your take on one more thing and see where you are with this. But I don't want to say that Kalen King and Johnny Dixon have been bored through 2 games, but there just has not been a lot of activity that has gone their way. Kalen King, what he did last year was really, really impressive. He deserves all the attention he's getting, but I don't know that there's a lot of highlight tape for Kalen this year through 2 games, and you could say the same for Johnny Dixon, the two corners, Penn State's 2 best corners. And I think, my question is, so they're going to see a pretty good receiver this week in Isaiah Williams. He had a very nice year for Illinois last year. He's off to a pretty good start this year. And I think that if he's going to catch the ball, he's going to have to go through one of those 2. And I'm just curious, we're talking about Illinois and Altmaier and how dangerous he's been. What happens if Penn State takes away his top target? Like, what will the Illinois passing game look like if Kalen and or Johnny kind of lock in on him and take him away? Because I don't think Isaiah's been tested in the first 2 games, and I just feel pretty strongly that Penn State's corners are really looking forward to this matchup because they've been a little bit bored.
Yeah, I mean, if Kalen King,
he doesn't have a pass defense this year. What is he throwing out 1 time?
If Kalen King / Johnny Dixon takes away Isaiah for Illinois, then their passing game is going to be pretty bad. And Altmaier's, like I mentioned earlier, is going to be running for his life. Now, the flip side is we just talked about how important the defensive line is going to be for Penn State this weekend. If they're not able to get home, or if they're not able to bring down Altmaier in the pocket, if he's able to extend plays, it's hard for any corner, even if you're Kalen King and Johnny Dixon, to stay with a man for so long. And so that's really kind of where, if you're Illinois, you can maybe, again, make this thing interesting. It's a 14-point spread for a reason, Bob. But yeah, this will be the first quasi test for Kalen King and Johnny Dixon. It's not Marvin Harrison Jr. It's not Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. And you look past Illinois here. I mean, Iowa's not going to test you with receivers. I mean, they've got a couple of nice tight ends. Northwestern's not going to test you.
Maybe UMass.
Yeah, maybe UMass. UMass ain't going to test you. So this is really like the
first half test.
Yeah, the first and maybe the only test until the Ohio State game from a receiver standpoint. Not talking about not knocking Luke Lachey or Eric All, the tight ends from Iowa, because they're pretty good. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to actually maybe see Kalen King get thrown at. And have him have an opportunity to make a play on the ball. We're talking about a corner who had 18 pass breakups last year. It was second most in the FBS. Yeah. And a lot of that too was, teams looking away from Joey Porter Jr. And so Kalen got a lot of work. I don't know if that was maybe the right strategy for teams, given how good Kalen is. I mean, they're both very good. So it might be a Johnny Dixon trial this weekend, and he might be tested. And so we'll see how he holds up if that's the case. Or, if Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac and Dennis Sutton just decide to get to Altmaier for 10 times combined and don't even let the dude throw, then maybe they won't be tested. Who knows? We're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, I just remember last year, I mean, it's not the same, but it was week 3 last year when the Penn State defense started to really show its fangs at Auburn. You mentioned Chop, the whole Adisa Isaac, Abdul Carter, all those guys, every one of those guys, Johnny Dixon, they all came to play. Auburn couldn't really throw the ball. They had 2 really good running backs, but that was a tough test, no matter what anyone else says. And I just wonder if maybe, you open against West Virginia. It's the first game of the year. Everyone's running around at 200 miles an hour, and they're just playing a little bit too fast. They didn't settle down, and they let that West Virginia quarterback out of the pocket a couple of times. But that offense only really scored once until Penn State's reserves are in. Except for one play, Delaware didn't do anything. You just wonder. I mean, I'm pretty sure we haven't seen the best by far from Penn State's defense, but it's also, you want to kind of peak at the right time, right? I don't think they've done anything wrong. I just think that there's another level they can get to, and I think Illinois is a game that probably has their attention. Curtis Jacobs remembers the Illinois game from 2 years ago. I'm sure you could share that with his teammates. Kalen King was on that team as well. So we're starting to see some games that are going to have their attention, just like the Iowa game next week at home. we could talk. That's a whole different podcast, but that's another game that I guarantee you there's a lot of people at Penn State are looking forward to that game for something that happened, I think, 2 years ago as well. But Johnny, I think this is an interesting opener. We buried the lead from James Franklin. I think this is their 8th straight year where they open on the road in the Big Ten, and at least they have 2 games under their belt. And I don't really know that the road atmosphere is going to affect Penn State in this one. And I think this team is really actually kind of looking forward to getting started in Big Ten play.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, just one final point that I wanted to make as we kind of put a bow on looking ahead to Illinois. We've talked about the offense. We talked about the defense. Just a quick thing about the special teams. Alex Falcons, Sander Sahadak didn't attempt a field goal against Delaware. Yes. It was almost like there were a couple of times, Bob, where we're sitting in the press box and we thought that, okay, here comes
perfect chance.
Falcons. Here comes a chance, for Falcons to make a 37-yarder or whatever it would have been. And it was almost like James, went out of his way, to not try a field goal, going forward onto 4th downs against Delaware. And they got them easily because it's Delaware. But I was kind of surprised that they didn't try to get their field goal kickers a little work last week, from distance. And again, first road game of the season. We'll see if that affects anything for those 2 guys. Who ends up starting the game as a field goal kicker? Again, neither of us think Penn State is in real danger of losing this game going into it. But again, special teams, we've seen weirder things happen with special teams, and the unit overall has been pretty sloppy to start the year. And so, they'll have to tighten things up as they enter Big Ten play.
Penn State, Illinois, Champaign, noon kick, or 11 a.m. if you're going to be out in the middle of the country. Johnny McGonigal and myself will be out there to give you guys all the updates, all the news, and all the analysis on Penn State's Big Ten opener once again on the road for the 8th consecutive year. Johnny, looking forward to seeing you in another state. Before you know, Friday's going to be here. So Penn State fans, they're 2-touchdown favorites. We'll see how it plays out. But I don't know how you can be upset with how Penn State has looked through 2 games, and Illinois certainly has some warts. But that was the case in 2021. So we'll see. Johnny, good talking to you again, and let's just get through this week, and we'll get on the road to Champaign, man.
Let's do it. Looking forward to seeing you at the airport on Friday, Bob.